We're taught that crying easily means you're weak, too sensitive, can't handle pressure, that kind of thing. You've probably heard it, or said it about yourself after wiping your eyes over a commercial, or a song, or some stranger's small kindness on the street that had no business making you emotional. But that might actually be backwards. The people who cry easily might not be broken regulators of emotion at all. If anything, they're overqualified ones. So why does one person tear up at a film while another sits completely dry-eyed through a funeral? Why does a kind word from a stranger undo someone while an insult barely registers? And why can the same person cry at a wedding, a goodbye, and a moment of pure relief, three totally different emotions producing the exact same response? By the end of this, you'll understand something most people never stop to consider. Crying easily isn't really one trait. It's at least 4 separate psychological mechanisms layered on top of each other, all getting mistaken for a single weakness. Most people who cry easily were taught early that it was something to manage. A parent might have said, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." A teacher rolled their eyes. A sibling mocked it enough times that the kid learned to leave the room before anyone could watch. Boys absorb this lesson especially fast. Crying turns into something you apologize for. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm like this." Say that enough times growing up, and it stops being a sentence and starts being an identity. There's actually a name for the pain underneath it: rejection-sensitive dysphoria. Basically, an outsized emotional reaction to criticism or disapproval that gets learned through repetition. The tears were never really the issue. It was the fear of how people would react to them. Think back for a second. Was there a time you cried and watched someone's face change? Not out of concern, but discomfort. That moment did more than embarrass you. It taught your nervous system to treat your own tears like something dangerous to keep an eye on. But take away all that modern shame for a second, because tears actually had a much older job. Before humans had real language, emotional expression worked as a survival signal. Visible distress told the rest of the group, "This is real. This can't be faked." And tears are genuinely hard to fake convincingly, which is exactly why they worked as proof. Proof of pain. Proof that it was sincere. Proof that bonded one person to another back when words weren't enough to do it alone. The thing we apologize for now is the same thing that once kept early humans close enough to survive together.
Here's the first real mechanism behind it. Researchers call it high emotional permeability, basically a thin boundary between witnessing something and actually feeling it. Most people process emotional information through a kind of buffer. They see something sad and it stays mostly external, like a fact they observed from a safe distance. People with high permeability don't get that buffer at all. They don't just see someone else's grief, they absorb it, almost on contact. A stranger holds a door open half a second longer than they had to. It's nothing, and somehow your chest tightens anyway. That explains a lot, but not everything. It doesn't explain why a stranger's kindness, not just sadness, can knock someone over emotionally. For that, you need a second mechanism. It's called empathic resonance, and it runs through something called the mirror neuron system, brain cells that fire both when you do something yourself and when you simply watch someone else do it. People with stronger mirror neuron activity will watch another person's joy or pain and light up similar neural patterns, almost like it's happening to them directly. That's why 2 strangers reuniting at an airport can bring someone to tears who has zero connection to either person. Their brain isn't just watching the scene, it's partly inside it. A friend brings up some tiny detail you mentioned once, months ago, in passing. You didn't think anyone was even listening that closely. And for a second, your throat just closes before you've consciously decided to feel anything. Then there's a third mechanism almost nobody brings up: cognitive appraisal. Crying isn't only a reflex response to sadness. A lot of the time, it's the result of a fast, unconscious read on what something means. Picture a father watching his daughter cross a graduation stage. Everyone around him is smiling, clapping, holding up their phones. He's the only one crying. And not because anything sad is happening. His brain just compressed 20 years into a single second. The hospital room, the bike she learned to ride, every argument, every good night, all of it landing at once, disguised as a name being called over the loudspeaker. The tears aren't really about the moment itself, they're about everything quietly packed inside it. This is also why gratitude can set someone off just as fast as grief can. Relief, too. Pride, even. The tears are chasing the meaning your brain assigned, not the bare event. An old text thread resurfaces in your phone's memories one day. Just a photo, a dumb inside joke, nothing important on paper. You end up staring at it way longer than you meant to.
And underneath all three of those sits a fourth layer that's purely physical. Crying switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's rest and recovery network, and the tears themselves carry out stress hormones like cortisol. So this isn't only psychological, it's a literal pressure release. Think about a pressure cooker. The one with a working valve is the safer one, not the one sealed shut tight. Some people's bodies just reach for that valve sooner than others, kind of like how some people sweat faster in heat than others do. It's not a personality flaw. It's a threshold, and some thresholds sit lower than others. You've lived these moments even without having words for them. That lump in your throat during a meeting when someone finally names effort nobody noticed, that's appraisal at work. The tears during a total stranger's wedding speech, that's resonance. The composure that finally cracks the moment you're alone in your car, that's the physical release, catching up with everything you'd been holding off. Here's something most people completely miss. This whole thing isn't only triggered by sadness. The exact same wiring that makes someone cry over a loss can make them cry over beauty too. A sunset that looks almost unnecessary, like it's showing off. A stranger's small, unprompted kindness. Relief, the specific kind that hits right after you find out the thing you were dreading didn't actually happen. There's a term for this: self-transcendent emotion. Things like awe and elevation and moral beauty. And it shares overlapping neural pathways with grief, which is partly why the same person can cry at a funeral and then cry again at a sunrise, for reasons that neurologically aren't as far apart as they seem. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The hardest piece of this trait usually isn't the crying itself, it's what happens afterward. A conversation everyone else forgets by dinner can stay sitting in your chest for weeks. Some offhand comment from a coworker gets replayed at 1 a.m, turned over and over for meaning it probably never actually had. There's a name for that too: rumination. Basically revisiting and reprocessing emotional moments long after they're technically over. The crying itself is visible and done within minutes. The carrying part is invisible, and it can drag on way longer than anyone around you would ever guess. So odds are, you've spent years performing a composure you didn't actually have, leaving the room early, blinking hard, looking away, managing everyone else's comfort with your honesty while you're privately still working through something that happened 3 days ago.
And that performance isn't free. Research on emotional suppression shows that holding an expression back doesn't just hide the feeling, it actually raises your heart rate and tension even while your face stays completely still. So the calmest looking person in the room is often working the hardest internally just to stay that way. There's a real cost being paid quietly underneath a very public performance. Which brings up the actual question hiding underneath this whole video. The opposite of crying easily isn't strength, it's emotional distance. People who cry the least aren't necessarily feeling less, sometimes they just have less access to what's underneath. Different wiring. Not necessarily better wiring, just different. But there's an upside hiding inside all that suppression too. The same mirror neuron sensitivity that makes someone cry during a movie tends to make them unusually good at reading other people. They pick up on tension before anyone's even spoken. They can tell a friend struggling from one short text. People feel understood around them without anyone trying because their brain is already quietly simulating what the other person's going through. So why do the burden and the gift come from the exact same source? Because none of these four systems pick and choose. Permeability doesn't care if the timing's convenient. Resonance doesn't pause to ask if the moment's socially appropriate. Appraisal fires based on meaning, not on whether you're prepared to manage it. And the valve opens once pressure crosses a line, not whenever it would be easiest. In relationships, this plays out in a pretty specific way. People who cry easily tend to become the safest person to be vulnerable around, because what you see from them is actually what's happening inside. There's no performance layer to push through. But that same openness also means they can absorb a partner's bad mood like it's their own personal weather, mistaking someone else's storm for theirs. We've built a whole culture around the idea that control equals strength, that stillness means maturity, that dry eyes mean discipline. But what looks like control sometimes just a slower nervous system, not a more disciplined one. And what looks like weakness is sometimes just four separate systems doing precisely what they were built to do, all at once. Maybe the real mystery here isn't why some people cry easily. Maybe it's how so many people learned not to. How many of them got so good at holding everything in that eventually they stopped recognizing what they were even holding until it leaked out somewhere else entirely, at the wrong moment, aimed at the wrong person, simply because it never got the chance to surface here. And maybe tears were never proof of weakness in the first place. Maybe they were proof that some part of you stayed connected to the world at a point where staying connected would have been so much easier to just stop doing. The world tends to reward people for feeling less, for staying composed and unreadable and unaffected by anything. But the people who end up understanding human experience the most deeply are usually the ones who never made that trade, the ones still willing to feel the whole thing all the way through, even when it costs them something in front of everyone watching. So here's something worth actually sitting with for a minute. What's the moment that caught you most off guard? Not sadness, but something good, something beautiful, or unexpectedly kind that you genuinely didn't expect to cry over.